All right. So all the groups of Microsoft 365. So this is just, and there's more. There's Yammer groups, and we're not even going to get into some of those more obscure groups that get created, but we're going to talk about the main groups that you will use throughout your intranet and your Microsoft 365 experience. So first one, of course, the Microsoft 365 group, also known as, or formerly known as, the Office 365 group. So RIP Office 365 group, you are now the Microsoft 365 group. And there's a couple different ways to create this group in addition to a team creates this group. So there's a couple different automated ways that we're going to talk about.
Couple, you mean like
Daniel, your eyes are going crazy over there.
Yeah, but it's like, was it 20? There's over 20 ways to create Microsoft 365 groups. Over 20 of them. Yeah. That's why that's what we're having this conversation today.
Give or take.
Ridiculous.
Give or take. And then we've got distribution groups, which are all about sending notifications and emails, whether you make it a manually added or created distribution group or a dynamic distribution group where you can really dig in. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these groups and how you can configure them to work for you. Security groups is all about creating a group of people to grant access. So allowing you to maybe add a new employee to a security group instead of going site by site or area by area to grant access to that resource. You can just use those groups to manage those things, making your life as an admin much easier. Mail-enabled security groups is like a security group, but with mail. Go figure. So just to add some additional resources. And there is a difference as well. And we're going to talk more about security groups versus mail-enabled security groups and where the main difference is going to be beyond mail. And then shared mailboxes. So all about bringing email together and sharing a mailbox for users as well. So next slide, SharePoint groups we'll touch on as well. Those are generated with each site. And we're going to talk about ownership and what that looks like in each type of group and how it really applies. M365 groups, and I'm gonna make M365 instead of Microsoft 365. They come with a lot. So if you do create this group out of the box without creating a team first, because team first creates this group, this first creates these resources, but not necessarily a team in Microsoft Teams, but you can always promote it. So something to keep in mind with this type of group is it is not just a group of people. This is a lot. You get a shared inbox, you're going to get a shared calendar and a shared document library, as well as a shared OneNote, a shared team site and planner. And all of this is going to be hosted through your SharePoint tools in the back end. So all of that content is there for you. So just keep that in mind as your users are maybe looking for collaboration tools. This may be above and beyond the collaboration they need, whether they just maybe need a shared inbox. This may not be the perfect solution because you're creating so much more than just an inbox on the back end.
Right, and that's kind of why we were talking about like governance with teams and all. If we haven't made that clear with anybody before, this is why we actually care about governance, is because when you're creating a team, you're creating all of this. And what Microsoft's doing with that update is changing what is created or changing how it's going to be surfaced, really more likely. It's how it's surfaced when you create it with teams is because of that governance issue, is that they're leveraging the I call it horsepower of Microsoft 365 group to have a team in Teams. And then, what does that mean on the back end? So, but anyway, that's changing slightly, but even still less, all the stuff is created when you create a team.
Yeah. One thing I actually forgot to mention, for those that are looking for dynamic group options, M365 can be a dynamic group if you configure that membership in Active Directory. So that's something to put a little asterisk on if you're interested in dynamic groups and you want users automatically removed and added based on maybe a department, a location, some sort of other permissions or
I'm going to show a little bit of
user
that,
profile
actually.
information. You can do that. So so for M365 group, you can get that asterisk on there for dynamic is an option. But it does require Azure AD Premium. So if that is something, anytime I say a dynamic group is allowed or capable, just keep that in mind. Not only asterisk it can happen, but you do need an additional license for that. Distribution groups. So all about sending notifications to a group of people, best for situations when you need to broadcast information to a set group of people, maybe all people in building A or everyone in HR or even everyone in the company. This is where it's actually going to the individual's inbox and it's just a list of people. And these can also be upgraded. So a lot of organizations have a lot of distribution groups that would be perfect candidates to upgrade to a Microsoft 365 group for the situation when they start to need collaboration tools. So instead of creating them side by side, consider if you're going to make a Microsoft 365 group for maybe a department or a business area, you could actually promote their distribution group to function as now a Microsoft 365 group.
And I would say, like, if you're talking to like regular normal users, like when they think of a group in, wherever, if they even think about AD or anything, this is what they're thinking of, right? They think of a distribution group first, like, oh, it's the email group that I send to everybody to talk, whatever, but obviously there's way more going on. Sorry, what we're talking about. And you guys all know that stuff. So
definitely with distribution groups are great, but you are just sending an email to a list of people instead of sending to a shared inbox. So it's a little different than a shared inbox. So something to keep in mind. Security groups and mail-enabled security groups. So I want to highlight that security groups are great. They're wonderful for applying permissions. One thing to note is if it is a security group, non-mail enabled, you can actually manage devices as well. So if you are using mobile device management, such as Intune, you can use a security group to manage devices and people. So two different types of security group access there. And then if you move it to mail enabled, you're looking at strictly people. So with mail enabled inbox and allowing those users to go in there. So again, this can be another dynamic group. So if you are looking to make it dynamic, that goes into Azure Active Directory, requires that additional licensing with Azure, but is something you can do based on, again, location or some sort of attribute for that user. You can have them add or removed dynamically. Awesome. Next slide.
Do you want to talk about the mail-enabled security groups? They only allow people, basically. I don't know if you want to, cannot contain devices.
That's what I said.
Oh, you already said that? Okay.
I said that.
Oh, you're a long time ago.
Also, my little icons helped.
Yeah, got it.
No
Okay.
devices. Slash.
No devices. Only people and not dynamic, right?
And it should allow them both to be dynamic.
Yeah, no,
correct
I think
me if I'm wrong. Just the mail enabled cannot manage devices. Whereas
got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So no mail, you're good. You can manage all the devices you want. All right, here we go. Shared mailboxes. So not to be confused with distribution lists, a shared mailbox is going to allow your users to share a mailbox. They can receive external mails if the administrator has enabled this. So sometimes that is a toggle that your admin, if you're creating these shared mailboxes and they need to receive email from non-team members or non-employees, you would need to enable that. And users with permission to the group can send on behalf of the email address that you've created for the shared mailbox. A couple advantages of this is if you're in a group that's receiving these emails, you'll be able to see who has replied. You'll be able to see or that it has been replied from because the inbox is completely shared from the sent folder to the inbox. So anything that happens within that will work. A couple of use cases, and I know Daniel's going to get into it, so I'm not going to steal his thunder here, but just like support at company.com or info at HR at, you can create these shared mailboxes where multiple people can reply to on behalf of that email address.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to make sure I want to talk about on this slide in particular is a shared mailbox is not a group, right? It's not a group in terms of what we're talking about as far as, security group or distribution group. It is a mailbox that you add people to. But a lot of times when we're asking or talking to clients about, these kinds of functionality, like I need a whatever to do something, right? The shared mailbox is an option that comes up in that same kind of vein of conversations. That's why we added it here for sure.
Yeah. One notate, and I'm getting a ping from Matt, so I'm going to share this. The shared mailbox is also a good option if someone in the organization needs to access for a terminated user's mailbox. So if you want to re-enable that email to capture those emails and then get them to a larger group, somebody who maybe was fielding a lot, that would absolutely work. And it does not consume a license, which is great. A regular mailbox can be converted to that. So.
Didn't know.
Fun facts.
Didn't know it. It's been a long
Wednesday.
time. Yeah, there you go. Fun fact Wednesday. Hey, we got a new
Fun fact Wednesday.
There you go. Perfect.
Fun facts for Wednesday. All groups have these three categories. You've got owners, members, and guests. And I really want to highlight owners. Big difference between owners and your members, because they're both going to have adding, depending on if it's a collaboration. Owners allow others to join. So they can add more people to this group, whichever type of group it is. Your owners can add those folks in, or remove individuals from the group if it's a non-dynamic group. And they can change more settings about shared inboxes, whereas group members are going to have interaction. When it comes to collaboration spaces, it's membership access, just editing privileges. You can add content, remove content, edit content. And then guests are going to be similar to group members based on the access you give them. But those are based on your admin if guests are allowed in your organization. But if you have any questions about owner, member, guest access on a specific type of group, please throw them in the chat and we'll absolutely address those. But those are the main points for those. This, we're not going to dig into too much, but we can share a resource at the end of this about administration for your groups, because this is a lot of content and things you can manage for your group. There's a lot of tools that you can use. From directory management, you can create naming policies, so acceptable names for your group. So you don't have, a good example is if you want to ensure, department names aren't in a group. So somebody doesn't create a rogue HR group trying to, spoof something. But you can create naming policies and enforce a standard of prefixes or suffixes to your group names. Dynamic membership, of course, you can create, which we already discussed. Asterisk, you need that license. Hidden membership, if you have a reason and you want membership of your group to be confidential, you can hide the membership from outside parties. So that is something you can manage. Creation permissions, who can create it, and even audit logs. So if you are allowing creation of groups to anyone in your organization, but you want to audit how these groups are being created and by who, you can absolutely do those. Delivery management. Features like send on or send as behalf, allowing specified users to send emails. You can even set sender restrictions, so you can control who's sending, as well as external user support. So if you do have guests invited, you can manage those permissions and have them included in email conversations. Transport rules. So if you they work for groups just like your Exchange server. So if your rules for message meet a specific condition, they can action on those messages. Mail tips. I don't know if you're familiar with mail tips, but it'll give information messages displayed to users while they're composing a message. So if you have, they can help reduce your, NDRs warning if they maybe are sending information they shouldn't, or it can notify you that maybe you shouldn't be typing that email. Proxy addresses, and even max send and receive, that can absolutely reduce sending huge messages that exceed bandwidth requirements. And then some content policies, so usage guidelines and even data clarification. So these are things, we have a lot of tools that Microsoft gives you. So if you are looking for any of these for your groups, please let us know and we can give you those resources. All right. Where do they get created? So the answer is in so many places. That is the true Microsoft way. If you can create it, you can create it in more than one place. And some are even automatic. So I'm not going to go through this whole grid. It's visual for that reason. So if you want to take a look at where you can create these items, we already know that making a dynamic group leans you towards that Azure AD portal. So that's a lot of times where people go first. If you have it syncing with Microsoft 365, there's usually a non-issue. You could create it one place and then go and reconfigure it in Azure later. So it's not an issue if you do end up creating it in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Some users will tell you Azure all the way. I completely understand. If you like it in there, you can absolutely start there. But the M365 Admin Center kind of gives you a little bit more of a walkthrough on it.
In reality, I'm looking at the Microsoft 365 group. I'm looking at that and going like, well, when you create a team site from, either, from SharePoint or SharePoint admin, it'll create a Microsoft 365 group as well. So I guess that's the automatic one. It's crazy, right? Create a team, create a Microsoft 365. So yeah, like I said, there's over 20 ways to create that Microsoft 365 group. Whereas, the email enabled or security group or dynamic or distribution, those things are pretty much like you're going to do it in an admin center of some sort, or through Outlook, I guess. But, basically that's kind of where you're at. Whereas Microsoft 365 is like pervasive. It feels like it's everywhere, which is why I think we're talking about this in a way, is because, it feels like since it's everywhere, it's like that is the de facto like answer for, I'm creating a group. What group should I create? Microsoft 365 group. And I think the answer there actually really is, it depends. And I think that's the whole point of the conversation, right? Sorry, moving on.
Yeah. It's not alone. Oh, so we did a morph transition. How fun.
I didn't do that. Somebody else did that. Arslan did it.
Somebody made our PowerPoint fancier than we intended.
Yeah.
All right. And then when to use which group. So this is where the not always. So of course, Microsoft 365 can give you many tools that help with a lot of different situations, but again, a lot comes with that group. You've got a site, you've got a calendar, and sometimes you just don't need those resources. So you may go to a different type of group. So this grid kind of gives you an example of some use cases of why you would use certain groups. And then Daniel's going to dig in further as to some use cases we've seen and what we would recommend in those scenarios. And a lot of times it just comes down to asking more questions about what do you really think this group should, what's the problem the group is going to solve? And then we can look for the best choice.